Well, Morgan, thank you for joining me this morning. I'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience and kind of just give you a moment to talk about the book, how it came together, and really, your thoughts and how you pulled it all together, if you will.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. My name is Morgan Housel. I've been a financial writer for my entire career. I was at the Motley Fool for about 10 years. I was a columnist at the Wall Street Journal for several years. And now for the last 5 years, I've been at a private equity firm called the Collaborative Fund. But my whole career has been writing about finance. And kind of my intersection that I like writing about, my beat, so to speak, is kind of the intersection of investing behavior and financial history. Like, what is the history of how people have thought about greed and fear and risk and opportunity? That's what I've always been interested in. And after writing about that for more than a decade, I figured I'd accumulated enough material, enough stories, enough anecdotes, enough insight maybe to put this book together. And a little bit about kind of the background of how I got into the behavioral side of investing. I started as a financial writer in 2008. Which was an interesting time because the world was falling apart in 2008. It was the biggest financial calamity since the Great Depression.
Let me ask you this. In 2008, did you have an appreciation for this is really different, or you know what? Because I started my career maybe a couple years before that, but I remember 2008 was, all right, yeah, I don't know, is this normal? Does this just happen every now and then? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's curious. Okay.
Yeah,
it was bad. I knew it was bad, but I was just trying to make sense of what the heck was going on. And that was really important because my early years as a writer were focused on trying to answer the question, why did people do what they did? Why did people make the decisions that they did during the bubble, during the bust? Why did people do this? And I realized over time, kind of slowly over time, that you could not answer that question through the lens of finance. If you're just looking at a finance textbook, it's not going to explain why people behave the way that they did during the bubble and during the bust. You can't find the answers in a finance textbook or an economics textbook. They don't explain it. But you can find subtle clues about why people did what they did through the lens of psychology, sociology, political science, history, biology. Those topics had a lot to say on why people did what they did. And that to me just opened the doors to this idea that investing is not the study of finance. It's a study of how people behave with money. And since it's a study of behavior, it's a really broad, all-encompassing field that you can learn a lot about investing in money through the lens of other fields. And that kind of is a big kind of cornerstone of the book. It's like looking at greed and fear and risk, which is what investing and dealing with money is, as a much broader topic than most finance books or educational courses would usually consider it.
Right. Well, and I guess, let me back up half a step. I first became aware of you maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. A colleague of mine, I think it was your blog post about the 3 sides of risk, right? And you lead into that, and we'll put it in the notes to this, if you will. But you're at a conference and somebody asks you a question, and you're on a conference stage, so you really don't have time. It's kind of what the thought is, and you respond. That's when I became aware of you, and what I've appreciated about you, and honestly, I saw it play out in the book. You have a very interesting way of writing, and really, I guess the one question I'd have for you is, do you find stats, and you've got a phenomenal amount of stats and data, do they back up your point, or do you let the data kind of take you where it does, and then kind of come back and analyze?
I think anyone who says they only follow the data and let the data lead them toward. I think anyone who says they only do that is kidding themselves. They might think they're being honest, but they're kidding themselves. Everyone has, and this is part of the book too, everyone has a mental model in their head of how the world works. I have a view of the economy works this way, politics works this way. Everyone has this structure in their head of how the world works. And that model in your head is different from person to person. Mine is different from yours because you and I have different backgrounds, different generations, different countries, different views of the world. Everyone has a different view of the world. And that view guides their analysis, it guides their learning, it guides their instruction, everything. So, I mean, just one simple point here. If you are from the baby boomer generation, then you kind of came of age in the 70s and 80s when inflation was very high. And so you remember gas lines, you remember 15% mortgage rates, which is something that you and I can read about that. We can try to be open-minded, but you and I didn't experience that. We didn't live through it as adults. And so someone, from my generation compared to the baby boomer generation, we might be equally smart, have the same data, but we might come to totally different conclusions about the fear, the risk of inflation, just because we've lived different lives. We're from different generations. So everyone's view of the world is completely different through no fault of their own, just kind of the dumb luck of where and when they were born.
Yeah. And you're right. You kind of talk about that a little bit in the book as well, in terms of, what's your starting point, and that kind of colors your view of things.